Hello, 8th grade. Today we're going to go over counting atoms and elements. So I'm going to take you through the slide presentation, then you will complete the questions and turn this in. So what we're really looking at in these notes are how are chemical formulas used to identify substances, and how do chemical formulas determine the number of atoms of each element using subscripts, coefficients, and parentheses. So, counting elements and atoms. So, an element is something that cannot be broken down into another substance. And when we're looking at a chemical formula, each capital letter represents a different element. So, if we're trying to figure out how many elements are in glucose, we look at this formula. This is the formula for glucose. We have one capital letter, two capital letters, three capital letters. So there are three elements in glucose. Now you're going to go through and tell how many elements are in each of these chemical formulas. Okay, now you're going to complete this organizer. You're going to pick the correct answer here and drag it up here. So make sure you read the box and that you bring the correct answer up here. So you tell me why you think scientists use stick and ball models similar to this one to represent chemicals. So you're going to tell me why here. Okay, so counting elements and atoms. So atoms is the smallest part of a chemical element, and they are found on the periodic table. And when atoms are combined, they create molecules. So there are elemental molecules where all the atoms in that molecule are the same type of atom. Or we have compounds where we have different types of atoms in a molecule. So the formula for molecules, that tells us the number and types of atoms that are in a molecule. So for instance, here we have two hydrogen atoms that are bonded as a molecule. So this is H2. That 2 indicates that there are two atoms of hydrogen. Here we have a molecule H2O. So we have this small 2 tells us that there are two hydrogen atoms in this molecule, so here and here. And there's no number here, so that tells us there's only one atom of oxygen in this molecule, so that is here. Now remember, if it's all the same element, it is not a compound. You have to have different elements for it to be a compound. So we start adding subscripts. This is how we know how many atoms of a particular element are in a molecule. So here we have the 2, and so that tells us there are 2 atoms of hydrogen. This 2 here also tells us there's 2 atoms of hydrogen, but because there's no number here, that means there's only 1. Now you're going to find the correct box and drag it here when a subscript exists, the previous element, find the correct answer and drag the box here. Okay, so now once you know this, you look at the chemical formula, you can actually figure out how many atoms are in a particular chemical formula. Let's look at this one, for instance. We have Ca, and there is no subscript number. That means there's only one of those atoms in that molecule. Then we have O4. So that means there are 4 oxygen atoms in this molecule. So 4 and 1. So total, there are 5 atoms in this molecule. So what you'll do is you'll go into edit mode and you will drag the circle around so that the numbers are correct. What I would do is figure out how many atoms are in one of the molecules and then drag the circle directly to where that number is. Okay, so now we're going to start adding in something called coefficients. This number tells us how many of those molecules we have. So it helps us to count the atoms in a chemical formula. And when you get to where you're balancing chemical formulas, this will be very important. So let's take a look here. So we have 2 sulfuric acid molecules. So if we don't even look at this 2, we just pay attention to this side of the formula. We have hydrogen and we have a subscript of 2. That means there are 2 hydrogen atoms in this molecule. For sulfur, there is no subscript. That means we only have 1. And for oxygen, there is 4. So we have 1, 2, 3, and then 4 is 7. So just one molecule of sulfuric acid has 7 atoms. But we have 2 of them. So we have to multiply how many atoms we have, which is 7, by 2. That tells us that this chemical formula has 14 atoms in it. Okay, so you are going to predict whether or not the chemical formula will include subscripts, coefficients, or both subscripts and coefficients, and then explain how you know. This is important. Don't just put this, put your explanation as well. Okay, so calculating the number of atoms including the subscripts and coefficients. So I just kind of went through this a few minutes ago, where each of these molecules, and you can see it here, have 2 hydrogens, that's the white, 1 sulfur, that's the yellow, and 4 oxygens, that's the red. And when you count all those atoms, that is 7. But we don't have one of these molecules, we have 2. So if we take that 7 and multiply it by 2, we know that there are 14 atoms in this formula. Okay, so now you're going to practice counting. And so let's take a look at the first one. So let's ignore our coefficient for now, and let's just look at the molecule itself. So Cu, there is no subscript number, so that is a 1. For the S, there's not 1 there, so that's 1. For oxygen, we have 4. So 1, 2, and 4 is 6. How many molecules of this do we have? 6. So 6 times the 6 atoms tells us that we have 36 atoms. So what you'll do is you'll go into edit mode, and when you pull away 36, you should have a green arrow. You're going to do this for each one of these lines. Figure out how many atoms are being represented here, and then move the atom with the correct number on it. Okay, so now we're adding in parentheses. So this means that aluminum is bonded to a molecule of sulfur and oxygen. So we can look at this and we can see that there are 2 aluminums, and then this means there are 3 of these. So we have 1 times 3, so there are 3 of these, and 4 times 3, so there are 12 of those. So if we have to figure out how many total atoms there are in this, we would count 2 plus, if you look here, we have 3 of these molecules, so 3s, and 4 times 3 is 12. So 2 plus 3 is 5 plus 12. So we have 17 atoms in this formula. Now you're going to find the correct answer for this box and drag the answer where it belongs. Now you're going to practice counting. Using all the things we've talked about, you're going to go into edit mode and you're going to pull the call out bubble down to the correct formula. Ignore these boxes at the bottom, but each of these should go with one of these. Okay, so Calculating the number of atoms, including subscripts, coefficients, and parentheses. We just keep adding to this. So we have 2 of these molecules now. So we have 2 aluminums. That gives us 4 total aluminums. Then we have, here we have 3 sulfurs, but then we have 2 of that. So that's 6 sulfurs. And here we have 12 oxygens, but then we're multiplying that by 2, so we have 24 oxygens. So then you just add those up and figure out the atoms for this formula. Okay, so what you're going to do here is you're going to go into edit mode and you're going to grab the arrows and you are going to draw an arrow from the formula to the correct number of atoms. So count up your atoms and draw an arrow. Okay. The chemical formula for sucrose is C12H22O11. So with your knowledge of atoms and molecules, along with these models that we're seeing here, describe an atomic model of 3 molecules of sucrose. What would be involved in that? How many of each atom will we have? Now you're going to drag and drop the correct answer for this question from one of these. Okay, so now for your last look, you're going to drag and you're going to use each one of these pieces once. You're going to drag the light green first, and you're going to put that under where, like this one, for instance, find which chemical formula has 10 atoms. And then beneath that, you're going to put the number of elements. So you should have 2 light green and then a dark green level on your pyramids here. Now check for understanding. Make sure that you are really answering these questions well, all 3 of them. This helps me to know if you understand what you've just covered. And then here, any questions you might still have. I hope this was helpful, and if you have any questions, always make sure you ask. Have a great day.